We have two speakers for you today. The first is Richard Sellers. Richard Sellers is the Senior Vice President for the Public Policy and Education of the American Feed Industry Association in Arlington, Virginia. He joined the AFIA in 1991 and was promoted to his current position in 2012. He holds a BS from the University of Memphis and an MS from the University of Arkansas in animal science. He's a board-certified professional animal scientist with the American College of Animal Science in the discipline of animal nutrition.
Thank you. Morning. Hate to pull you away from your sausage, biscuit, and coffee. I bring you greetings from Washington, whether you want them or not. Has anybody noticed this is an election year? And I don't care who gets president, really. I mean, we have to work with both parties. I have a personal preference, but by and large, I just want a new president. And the reason is we're in the midst of an enormous amount of work because presidents, and I'm sitting near a speaker. You're controlling it. Okay. Presidents in their last year of office do what? A lot. Actually, a lot. They're building legacies. You know how they do that? It's called the executive order. Or they put out rules. We've seen pretty much, did you see the two new rules that came out from FDA? One of them voluntary, decrease the salt by a third. The other one is new food labels with added sugar guarantee. Do you know what that's going to cost the food industry? Whoa, well over $1 billion to make all those changes. So they're doing what we refer to as cleaning out the refrigerator. Okay? This is a cleaning out the refrigerator effort. 3 years ago, the agency, actually 5 years ago, the agency decided to move this direction. And 2 years later, which would be 3 years ago, they put out policies, and I'll talk about those. 209 and 213, that doesn't really mean anything to you all. But they impact how the agency regulates things. And it's kind of interesting because it wasn't rulemaking. It's not required, but all of the 26 drug sponsors said they're going to go this way. And why are they going to do that? Because the threat of the agency that they would take these drugs off the market, which would not help our companies, not help certainly pork producers, and certainly destroy the drug industry and the animal drug industry in the United States. So I want to talk about how we've worked in it. And in December of this year, it'll be 20 years since the Animal Drug Availability Act came out in 1996 that established the Veterinary Feed Directive. And your industry, the pork industry, has been in the forefront of all that because 70 days after that law was passed, the first drug came out, which is tomicocin. You all know it as Pulmotil. And you've been working with that, so you all are the most familiar with the VFD process. By the same token, by our estimates, the drugs that are changing, there are 19 of them, chemical compounds with 280 uses. You have 80% of those. So you're going to be impacted the largest degree by these changes. But you're familiar with them. You work with some of the electronic companies that process these eVFDs. And we think that's the way of the future. But in probably 6 to 9 months, a lot of the paperwork will flow. And we've got a lot of paperwork requirements we're trying to work out with FDA. I was up at FDA yesterday arguing with them with a bunch of stuff and trying to get them to see our side of the world. And they talked to me in the hallway and said, and this is weird, there's a drug sponsor that wants to take a drug that's currently over the counter and turn it into VFD before all these changes take place. And would we be able to handle that? Well, yeah, we'll be able to handle that, but it'll be a bit chaotic. And why on earth would they want to do that for their producer customers? It makes the drug more difficult to get. Well, they said, we expect that the changes in the drug will drive it to VFD anyway, and they want them to happen now. And I went, tell me who the drug, well, they can't tell me who the drug sponsor is. And I'm like, well, I'll find out who it is, and I'll talk to them because it's not going to be in their best interest at the current time. So let's get into this mess. I'm with the American feed industry. We have 600 corporate members. Many of our members make swine feed. I'm trying to think, Smithfield, Murphy. Yes. Trying to think, Cargill, Purina Land O'Lakes. We have a substantial hog feed business in our organization. So there's 183 million tons of feed manufactured in the United States. Does anybody know the largest segment of that? The majority segment of that is not you. Poultry. Is poultry. Almost 55% of the turkey, laying hen, breeder hen, and broiler, by far, represents almost 55% of that 183 million tons of feed manufactured in the U.S. So our members manufacture 75% of that. There's a lot of small mills out there that we don't interact. There are 6,000 feed mills in the United States, and they do a wide variety of things. The commercial segment is biggest in cow-calf, dairy, and hog farming. So the VFD arose because we started talking about it in 1995 because the agency wanted to move toward prescription medicated feeds. And we looked at that seriously. Our lawyers did some studies and found out that the state pharmacy boards would require us to have a pharmacist or a veterinarian dispense prescription medicated feeds from the feed mill, which would have been cost prohibitive, would have disrupted the market in a major way. And we said no. So we sat down with one of the largest coalitions I've ever been in, probably the largest, that included the state pharmacy boards and created this veterinary feed directive. And it's unique in that it's not a prescription under federal or state law. It says that in the law, so the state pharmacy boards can't regulate it. So the first drug, as I said, was tilmicacin. Now there are 3 compounds with approved uses, 6 uses, and a use is considered a new animal drug. So you'll hear that referred to. It doesn't make any difference if the drug compound is any number of companies. Once it goes off patent, generics can jump in there and start getting approvals out. So swine, fish, and beef cattle, and I think one of the swine drugs, Nuflor, is not marketed. Is that true? I don't know if somebody's here. Okay. So last June, the FDA amended the VFD rule, the final rule that came out, and changed some of the form things. One of the principal things that changed is veterinarians no longer have to figure out how much feed that's going to be manufactured for this. That's a function that our member companies do on a daily basis, and so the agency agreed to that. Another couple of things is the license number and state of license is taken off the form. We opposed putting that on there because it essentially made our companies policemen. So you have a veterinarian in one state writing a VFD in another, and whether they're licensed in that state, they're supposed to be under the state practice, but that's not our function to do that. And when we asked the agency why they had that on there, they said so that they could find the veterinarian. And I thought, well, there's the name and address on there. Well, they might lie about that. Well, they might lie about they're professionals, that kind of stuff. And in the almost 20 years, we haven't found that to be the case, but we've had some concerns about whether we're supposed to police that or not. It's a really simple process, and you all probably know this. It's not rocket science. There's a lot of details involved in who can get what. But basically, either producer contacts a veterinarian or the veterinarian on his or her own accord says, you need a VFD drug for your animals. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write this veterinary feed directive. And it's interesting. It's kind of not anything like this in federal law, but the VFD is actually the form and the drug. So you have VFD containing, veterinary feed directive containing feeds. So it's really kind of unusual the way it's couched. So the VFD is actually an order by the veterinarian. And let me make one thing really clear. That order solely authorizes the producer to use that drug in a manner described in the VFD. It doesn't give us the authority to manufacture it. We can manufacture it without a VFD. The veterinarian can carry around VFD feeds in a vehicle and dispense them from the back of a truck or whatever. But the VFD is designed to describe and in what manner and under the regulations how the producer can use that VFD medicated feed. Okay? So the veterinary writes a VFD, keeps the original. And in your cases, a lot of it comes electronically. One of the things we're trying to get changed in these electronic systems is the producer has to identify a feed manufacturer. In the commercial side of the business, that doesn't always happen. They go shopping around. Depends on how the relationship is with the feed company. So they don't necessarily, the veterinarian doesn't have to fill that in. So the veterinarian retains the original, whether it's an electronic copy or a paper copy, gives a copy to the producer, and this is something new. you have to keep that copy for 2 years. Okay? If you're a large integrated operation and you're contracted to grow animals for something, you still have to keep that copy as a producer. However, FDA has recently said that maybe the feed mill can keep it for you, because we know when our companies deliver medicated feed and they have to give you a label, it goes on a nail, and the wonderful Iowa wind carries it off to Minnesota or something. Yes, sir?
Will the label that goes on the nail now have the VFD number on it?
VFDs don't have to have numbers. VFD can be written on anything.
The nail that I put in my file
Right.
contain the information I need to retain.
Right. It's that information that the law and the rules require be on that piece of paper. And it could be on a brown paper bag, believe it or not. It doesn't have to be a form. We've suggested forms and numbered for tracking purposes, but it's all over the ballpark. But yeah, you're supposed to maintain it. And if you're in an integrated operation, the integrated feed mill contract company can hold that for you. And I don't know, somebody here from Global Vet Link? I think Global Vet Link actually can retain it for you as well as an electronic record. So the producer contacts a feed distributor. It doesn't have to be a feed mill. It can be a retail distributor, dealer, whatever. And the dealer sends an acknowledgement letter first to the drug supplier in order to receive the drug premix, that we will not distribute this drug premix that we get to make feed without a valid legal VFD or a similar acknowledgement letter from the person we distribute it to. Okay? And then the feed distributor has to notify FDA one time, we got the VFD drug and we're going to distribute it. So that sounds pretty easy. If you're a producer and you get the drug, you don't have to notify FDA. Okay? You don't ever have to talk to FDA unless they show up and say, let me see your VFDs. We've done some researches and talking with FDA because we were concerned that they were getting VFDs in the file that would let out your name and address. To the best of our knowledge, that has not happened in inspections that we reviewed over a 6-month period. So you're kind of protected. Can FDA request that VFD? Yes, they have a legal right to request it and copy it. Have they done that? To our knowledge, they have not. They have looked at them in feed mills and said they were valid or invalid or needed correcting and moved on. I have not seen any situation where they've come to the producer. We do expect them to come to the producer. I'm not sure how or when, maybe through a traceback just to do surveillance over time, but they haven't let us know that. There will be a soft rollout of this after January of 2017.
Richard,
Yeah.
that example, so the feed distributor could be
Feed mill, retailer, could be a veterinarian. They're carrying the drug with them and they've told FDA, we're going to make this, we're going to distribute this drug. It works. Anybody. One of our big concerns, and I'll go into this in a minute, is how do we ship a type B medicated feed, a hog concentrate, to a farmer? We can't do that without a valid VFD. So if they're mixing those as a grind-to-mix operation, how do we do that? And FDA said, well, they have to be a feed distributor. And I went, so they have to notify you and they have to be distributing feed. And they said, yes. I don't like that coming from their lawyers. It's the only time I've ever seen that happen in my 30 years of working with them. The problem is, and I ask them, are you going to tell your investigators and the field staff? Because right now they're all operating independently of the headquarters. They take actions and do all. That's typical in a Democratic administration. If a Republican gets to be president, that will all be reined in and they won't take any actions without the headquarters approving it, which is kind of Jeffersonian democracy, I guess. At any rate, any questions about this process? It's not rocket science. There's a lot of nuances. I'm glad you're not in the cattle industry. Oh, my God. I went to the Academy of Veterinary Consultants, and I was just pummeled with like 30, 40 questions of situations, of shipping fever, and this stuff animals going across state line and moving all over the place. And I never really thought about that. And they just got into these drugs a few years back. Okay, here's the list. These are, we finally have put together a trade name list. These are the drug names. You may know them. There's some of them aren't marketed. It took us about 6 months to get this list together because this website is only for people that read regulations. and even I do that for a living. And then it took us another 6 months to get FDA to say, that's the list. They'll say, that's the current list. So there may be others they may add to it along the way. But there's a lot of drugs in that list that you all use.
What's not on there?
Okay, what's not on there? Dewormers, Carbadox. Carbadox is going away anyway. It's kind of moot, isn't it? That's good. Bambamycins, ionophores bacitracin, and a few other coccidiostats. And I don't think you all use coccidiostat, right? We thought we'd be able to use growth promotion feed efficiency claims for feed and in feed ingredients. No, there's still some going to be out there. So, and then we'll talk about the combinations that go with that as well. So FDA issued these guidance documents telling the sponsors they need to get rid of this, and it all comes to fruition at the end of, or in the middle of December. If they're going to change any of the claims on the current drugs, they have to submit data, and there'll be a waiting period as they review it. Most of them are likely just going to remove the animal production growth promotion claims. 19 chemical entities, 280 uses. Some are already VFD. So all of these would come under the control of a veterinarian via the VFD, and the claims would disappear. We've got a big mess with premixes and how long we get to use them and all that, but that didn't really affect all of you all. We focused on the process and the administrative changes. I don't talk about antibiotic resistance. My professional opinion is like the director of the National Institute of Infectious Disease. That's a minor issue in this. I'm not sure why we're driving this way. And then he went on to talk about all the things that physicians need to be doing. Like my daughter who had 22 ear infections didn't need to get an antibiotic, but I'm a screaming parent and I want an antibiotic. And she either gets better in 5 days because she didn't get the antibiotic, or she gets better in 5 days because she did get the antibiotic. And now we know that 70% of the ear infections are viral in nature, and antibiotics wouldn't work. But there is a president's working group called CARB that's been working on this, and a lot of focus. This is one component of it, and it is going to happen. Good, bad, or indifferent. The biggest comments I'm getting are, hey, Steve, FFA and 4-H-Use. FDA recently said that the supervisor of those kids and their animals can act as an intermediary for the VFD, but they can't write the VFD. And so I'm really sorry about that, but that's the way we're going. And everybody has to play along with the same game. As I said, the original VFD form or electronic version is retained by the veterinarian, copies to the producer and the feed distributor. You can fax to the feed distributor. The veterinarian can fax to the producer, and the producer can give to the feed distributor. E-VFDs are also allowed through Global VetLink or any of the other systems that are coming online. Phone-in VFDs are not allowed because Ethel and Joe in our front offices don't know the difference in oxytetracycline and chlorotetracycline. Feed mills can deliver smaller amounts that are listed on the order and ship some of it later. And that's a paperwork nightmare for our company because they have to write it on the form. Delivering a VFD to the farm before the producer has a VFD is a bit problematic, as I've described. We think that FDA is all right about that. But how a producer becomes a feed distributor remains to be seen, and that's kind of on the back burner right now as we work through some other issues with them. We'll work it out. You'll be able to get those, in our view, the type Bs to the farm, the hog concentrates, without having a VFD. So there's a huge paperwork challenge for us, and we think before all these electronically get going and companies get involved in the electronic, there'll be a bunch of paperwork flying back and forth. We think we're put at a competitive disadvantage, and I've had some not pleasant arguments with FDA over we are not going to compromise our relationship with our customers and their needs and their animal welfare. And FDA said, well, you have to understand that we're under a lot of pressure from groups that really want this to happen. And I'm like, well, El Toro Poo Poo, that really does concern me, and you're going to follow the conscripts of the law and the way this is laid out, and where it starts to interfere with our process of working, we're gonna go to the Hill and scream bloody murder. And they're going to come down on you like flying mammals out of Hades, so to speak. Storing VFD drugs prior to use and receiving them, as I said, I keep mentioning that because it is a big issue, we know. And we are talking to the agency both in meetings, formally, and in the hallway. And like I said, a not pleasant conversation I had yesterday with them. Sometimes I give you a little insight, in part of my job is to be an advocate for the industry and our customer group. Sometimes I just have this distinct feeling that they're one step behind the chapter that they're writing, and they don't really have a very clear understanding of how this works. Like at one of the public meetings, I said, so what are we going to do with liquid feeds and top dresses and blocks that are big in the cattle industry, that are big retail product? And the guy up there who's heading this, Dr. Bill Flynn, said, we hadn't really thought about that. And I thought, well, the clock is ticking, and our companies want to know where these things are going because they're the same drugs. And then I went to the sheep industry meeting, and they were screaming bloody murder to me because they don't have enough drugs anyway, and how is this all going to work? And I said, we're your advocate. We're trying to get it all laid out and easy and flowing. It's going to be hell for the first 6 months, but we'll do. We've got a big problem with what's known as Part 11, which is electronic records, electronic signatures. If Global Vet Link sends an eVFD to a veterinarian, or from a veterinarian in their system to a producer, and it comes to the feed mill, we can't store it electronically because none of our companies comply with that regulation about electronic certification because it's very, very expensive. It was written in the 90s for mainframe computers. So Cargill and even Land O'Lakes Purina tell me they can't do this. It's too cost prohibitive. So what do they have to do? They have to print it out and file it, sign it and date it and file it. If you go into a plant manager's office of any feed mill in America, they have the FDA file cabinet. Because for GMPs for medicated feed, they do the same thing since nobody is Part 11 compliant. We recently got wind that FDA said, this is a new era. They are so run by lawyers, and it's taken them so long to get stuff done. They said to us, if you'll write us some questions, we'll tell you how to phrase the questions back in an email, and then you can write us a formal letter with those questions, and we can answer them without having to go through the lawyers, and we'll get this solved. And I went, as a guy who works by the regulations, and when I think outside the box, people go to jail, I'm thinking, okay, I can do this. And I did it, and I talked to them yesterday, and they said, we almost are there. We're going to get you the questions back probably next week. So we'll get Part 11 mess required. However, if a veterinarian faxes it to us, and it's not in a Part 11 compliant system, we can store it electronically. And that's real important to them because if they come into a plant, what do? They have to go through a file cabinet. We can't show them any electronic records, although the companies keep them electronically. Is that not absurd? We've had to deal with this for 20-something years. So there is also a veterinarian's affirmation statement, intention statement, that was included in the final rule, and it says 3 things. Veterinarian has to mark this, and this is new on the VFD as of October. And it's because of combination drugs. So legally, a combination drug with a non-VFD drug and a VFD drug, if the veterinarian authorizes a VFD drug, he or she also has to authorize the combination. Our lawyers, and I don't agree with that, but heck, it's already done. It's in the rules. So there are 3 things they say. Either you can't use this with any legal combination, you can use this only with the following drugs in combination, or you can use it with any legal combination. And we've asked all veterinarians to mark number 3, because if a producer comes in and says, yeah, and I need a dewormer, and the feed company is ultimately responsible for labeling and manufacturing a legal product, can make that determination of whether this VFD drug is approved with a dewormer or not. And if it is, we'll manufacture it, and the veterinarian's authorized that any of it. So that's an important, if your veterinarian specifies one or says number 1 or number 2, you need to go back and say, I need some other things in there. Just mark number 3. One of the issues is all of these feed drugs are fairly new, and the combinations and stuff to veterinarians, and we understand that, and we think eventually the electronic systems will control with drop-down menus and stuff. Give you one example. Some of the drugs are sold like chlorotetracycline that have 4 or 5 different manufacturers, and they have 4 or 5 different approvals. And some of them have different withdrawal times. So when a veterinarian picks that drug and marks it, and it goes to the feed mill, he needs to know what the feed mill is using, which drug sponsor, which drug product that has chlorotetracycline in it they're using, because it has different types of uses and withdrawal time. And that gets a little more complicated. Some of the older drugs, it's like that. Not all of them, thank goodness. Generics. FDA made an about turn when we argue with them. Originally, if the veterinarian wrote Pulmotil on there, we had to use Pulmotil. They've now said if there's a generic out there, and more common in all of these drugs that are coming with chlorotet, there's a bunch of generics of chlorotetracycline. If there's a generic out there, the feed mill can use that and save you dollars if the veterinarian doesn't object. Okay? Just like a human physician. If the human physician says, voluntary formulated not permitted, then they have to use the pioneer drug, which is a good thing. It's going to save some money. So how will this all happen? This is bizarre. All of these approvals are being banked, and they'll all be released one night in mid-December when I'm sitting up at 3 a.m. going, oh my God. All hell breaks loose the next day. All of these changes will happen in one day. Drug sponsors, not saving them, they're getting their approvals. I did have a call, and I need to talk to the drug sponsor. FDA says that all of the drug sponsors aren't coming in. We expected all of this to be finalized at the end of January, and then feed companies to be notified. One company told me they had 38,000 label changes to make and figure out how much in the future on a reduced amount that the market's going to handle and use, and what do those products look like, and how often are they going to use them. That's a market VP's nightmare. Will it require training for vets? And FDA said no. AVMA's got some stuff up. I know AASV, Swine Veterinarians, has some training too. I've talked to them and the bovine practitioners and the avian pathologists. List of trained vets, no. And our big issue is you're going to have these written, and in some of the minor species and stuff, there aren't enough health professionals. Where are all the veterinarians going to come from to write these? As the process has evolved, I'm hearing numbers of between $5 and $35. We kind of stay out of the marketplace to write a VFD, and I know of at least one large feed company that charges $25 to fill a VFD because they've got cost of maintaining all those records and all that stuff. So the marketplace will handle that. It'll all shake out. There will be 6 months of chaos because it's a federal program, just the way the federal government works. They don't know how it works. Oh, we didn't think about that. And over time, it will evolve. FDA's being very good. Recently, they had a series of 14 meetings with the Farm Foundation. Did anybody go to those? I'm not sure. They didn't contact us. We finally told them who some speakers might be from feed company. They wrote a really good report. Said we were on board with what was going on, but there wasn't a whole lot of knowledge out there. FDA attended them, and they actually answered some 20-something questions that were raised in writing, which was a new wealth of information on VFD for our companies. And at the bottom of the letter it said, these represent a personal opinion and not agency opinion. They are neither binding nor whatever. And I talked to Bill Flynn, who wrote that. He's Deputy Director of Center for Veterinary Medicine. He said, that just really galled me. And I said, Bill, you're going to write the policies. And he said, I know, but our lawyers made it put it on there. It makes it look like I don't know what I'm doing. What can I say?
Yeah.
So we're addressing all these. We want an orderly phase-in. We've got premixes in the marketplace. We've got to $200 or $300 a bag. And will FDA allow those to be exhausted? We're working through that, but that doesn't affect the producers except the feed mills in the swine industry. So the rule went into effect on October 1. It started getting enforced on October 31, although they haven't done anything. In summer, fall this year, there's drug sponsors supposed to contact feed companies with the labels. On January 1, everybody must cease all growth promotion claims, and all of those products must be under the order of a veterinarian via the VFD. We're actually starting on doing a survey of our members and National Grain and Feed Association members to find out how much premixes are out there and what volume. FDA really wants that information. I tell them that's tough. They can't have it. Or they can have it for $300,000. All of the drug sponsors, our knowledge, seem to be removing the production claims and leaving therapeutic claims. And we'll contact the feed companies.